This is Extra Paycheck Podcast, episode number 55.
You're listening to Extra Paycheck Podcast, where you will learn how to build and grow your own successful online business. Now, here's your host, Alex Soul.
Welcome to yet another episode of Extra Paycheck Podcast. This is episode number 55, and this is a very special episode for me. First reason being that this episode is released on April 11th, which is my birthday. And the second reason, which I would say even more important reason, is this episode marks 1 year anniversary of Extra Paycheck Podcast. The very first episode was released on April 6th, 2015. So it's been one full year that I've been releasing one episode per week every single Monday for the past year. This is why I've decided to dedicate this very episode to talking about the Extra Paycheck Podcast, what's been up, what's been down, share some difficulties, some wins, and some fails with it. And I think many of you will appreciate this kind of information, and especially those who might be thinking of starting a podcast. So let's start with that. Now, when people ask me what was the biggest difficulty starting the podcast, and honestly, I'm thinking about it now, and I would say it was getting out of my comfort zone. I have an accent since English is not my first language or second or third. So that's another thing to keep in mind, and it kind of pulled me back from sharing my voice out there, because I know that some people would judge me on the accent, but you know what? I don't care what people say. My point here is to share great content with beginner entrepreneurs or with people who have already launched their business and they just need more advice. This is the main reason I am doing this podcast and have been doing for a year. Second difficulty that I've had with this podcast is finding guests and getting them on the podcast. If you've been listening to the show, you know that most of my episodes feature successful entrepreneurs from different walks of life. And sometimes it's not that easy to get them to come on the show and even to find them. And that takes a lot of time to research, to reach out to those people. And I would say that about 10 to 20% of them actually get back to me, in the sense that they actually book a recording and we go through with it. So let's say 15%, that's pretty much the conversion rate on that. Some weeks it's a lot less, some weeks it's a lot more. So if you're doing a podcast, or if you simply want to interview someone for your blog or video, regardless of what it is, don't be scared to approach them. The worst thing that happens, they are going to say no. Otherwise, it's something that I would highly recommend. And I understand that you might be out of your comfort zone doing that, but it's totally worth it because the insights that you get from those people are quite amazing. Your audience is going to love you for it, for sharing this kind of information. And just connecting with those people, it feels great as well because you are getting some kind of knowledge and tips and hints and background on their stories, and you realize that entrepreneurship is not all that easy. And this is when you realize that things that haven't been working out for you, it's okay. It's not, it doesn't mean that you're failing because something didn't work as when you thought it would. It happens to most of us. We don't succeed at the first try usually, and there's so many factors that go into that. I love talking with other people, and this podcast is being a great reason to do so. I've had quite a few technical issues and difficulties over the time. Not that many, but they do happen. For instance, since I record interviews remotely, meaning that I'm at home or wherever I'm in the world, and usually my guests are in some other part of the world, we kind of have to do this recording through Skype. And Skype is not the most reliable thing that ever existed. So sometimes there's bad connection, and usually the bad connection is not caused by Skype by itself, but it's either caused by the internet connection of my guest or my own. And it has happened that my internet connection has been bad, so I had to stop the recording, apologize to the guest, and restart my modem and router, hoping that connection will get faster and the quality will get better. It also happened that I had to ask my guests to do the same, because if I restarted my whole setup and I know that everything's working super fast and I did a speed test and my internet is indeed fast, and we're still getting issues, I would ask my guest to maybe restart the internet connection on their end and see if that helps. Another technical issue I've had, twice, it happened to two different episodes, is that the sound card somehow gave up during the recording, and the computer basically recorded the whole file, the full conversation, but when I went to listen to it, it was empty. It was just an empty file without any sound in it. And that kind of sucked because I had to recontact that guest and apologize once again and get them to record another episode, basically a copy of the first episode. And it's quite embarrassing when that happens, but you don't really have a choice. Technology is not always very stable either, and you have to be ready for these kind of problems. I am planning to change my setup to upgrade it for 2016, and hopefully this will eliminate some of these connection issues or audio issues. But, that's something that I have to do quite a bit of research on and decide what kind of setup I want to go and which parts of that setup I would need to purchase and how to install it and how to use it actually. So that's another thing. And this is why I recommend people starting with a very simple setup at first, because a good setup for podcasting could cost you well into thousands of dollars. And you don't want to spend that much money if you are not 100% sure you will be, you will love doing your podcast, because it's kind of a waste of money. So I suggest spending $100, maybe $200 on starting your podcast. And this is when you will realize if you love doing it or you don't love doing it and you won't keep on doing it. And it will save you a lot of money in the long run if you decide not to do it. By the way, if you haven't already, you can check out my step-by-step podcasting guide at extrapodcast.com/start podcast, one word. This is where I explain how exactly I set up my podcast. It's a totally free guide, no opt-in required. And it's really step by step from buying your microphone and up to having your show listed on top of iTunes categories. So yeah, very, very detailed guide. Check it out if you are thinking about starting a podcast. Just like growing your business or a blog or a website or anything, it takes time and work and dedication to grow a podcast. And to be honest, I haven't seen the growth that I was expecting. But it is growing steadily, and I know that I'll just need to put in more effort into promoting this podcast and getting people to talk about it. One of the things that I do is that I promote it on social networks, including Reddit. And I don't just plug it in and telling people listen to my podcast. What I normally do is when I see a conversation about a very specific topic, and I know that I had a guest on my show who talked about that very topic, I would usually simply direct people to this very episode. I don't tell them just, listen to my podcast. I tell them, hey, I had such and such person and they talked about how they overcame that problem or how they solved that or how they earn money by doing that. And you can listen to this very episode right here and I link to it. And usually people appreciate it because I am giving them value. I am giving them very relevant information. And this is what matters the most. Guys, I can't stress it enough. You can't just plug your links everywhere just like that without any context or reason. You really have to be relevant if you want people to pay attention to you and to like what you're sharing. Super, super important. Also, in my case, what makes me smile every single time is when I find mentions of my podcast elsewhere on different networks, on different websites. It warms my heart when people recommend my podcast to other people and, they usually add some kind of comments telling them, oh, well, like this guy's doing a great show or on entrepreneurs or on online businesses, and check out his episode number 22 or 29 or whatever it is, whatever episodes. And it's really, really nice to find people talking about your content because you're doing something right for people to share your content with others and to suggest others to listen to your show. Amazing feeling when that happens, and this is why you should be writing or producing great content, and I'm sure people will share it as well. That's kind of the whole point of writing or producing amazing content, whichever format that is, audio, video, or text. Just make sure it's good quality and people will share it around. Now, what happens when people share it is you're getting mentions and you're getting backlinks, which is really great, not just for your podcast, or let's say in my case, not just for my podcast, but also for my website itself. Because I put out my show notes pages on the Extra Paycheck blog, and every time someone links to it, I get some, I get a little boost, I guess, in Google's eyes. They see that there's a new backlink, and over time, all these little backlinks, they add up, and I get better rankings for certain keywords and certain posts, certain podcast episodes, and it really, really helps the SEO strategy, and it really helps ranking. That's something to think about. Now, what happens is that my guests who I interview on the podcast, they do the same. Some of them will link to me directly from their website. Some of them will share the episode link on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, whatever they're using as their favorite social media outlet. They will share those links. Sometimes they will even send it out to their email list, to their subscribers, which doesn't only... I've been talking about getting backlinks, but it's not only about backlinks. It's also about getting new audience. It's about reaching people that otherwise I wouldn't find or I wouldn't be able to reach. Now my show and the whole Extra Paycheck brand is exposed to thousands and thousands of people who will listen to the show, and some of those people will not care much about it. Some people wouldn't like it, and some people would love the show and they would subscribe and they would start reading my blog and they would get on my email newsletter. And I find that very, very amazing. And it goes both ways, because my listeners or my readers, they also find out about new entrepreneurs that I feature on my show. And some of them, they shift to following those people. And shift is a wrong word here, because a lot of them, they wouldn't ditch me for someone else or vice versa. They would just find another person that they want to follow, or maybe follow more closely, or someone who is maybe more related to what they want to do in life or to their niche. So that's a great thing, and I find this kind of way of cross-promoting your brand with other people simply amazing, because there is an instant trust that's being built. If you have been following me and I'm talking about an entrepreneur or an author or whoever it is, you instantly know that this person is kind of trustworthy, or at least has to be trustworthy, as opposed to someone who would just cold email you and tell you, hey, look at my story. You wouldn't care about that, right? But if I tell you, hey, check out this person's story, chances are you will trust me and you will check out that person's story. So that's a really, really great way to promote yourself and to promote others. And it goes both ways. And it doesn't have to be a podcast once again. You have to, you can write blog posts and talk about those people or interview them. You can do videos on YouTube and do the same. Just network with others, and this will help you grow your brand, and it will definitely help you grow your audience. That's something to always keep in mind. So at this point, I have been traveling for about 2 months through Asia, and I will be traveling for another month and a half or so. But don't worry, the episodes are still being released every single Monday, and I am planning to keep this podcast going for quite a long time. Maybe I might be doing some changes, like adding more episodes per week, or I'm not sure yet. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I am always thinking about the podcast and the blog and my niche sites and pretty much everything that I do. And I keep trying to decide how I could make it better for my audience. So if you have any suggestions, please do go ahead and email me at alex@extrapodcast.com, or simply leave a comment on the show notes page for this episode at extrapodcast.com/55. This will help me get a better idea of what you guys want to hear, what kind of content you want to hear, how often you want to hear it. So please do share your thoughts, ideas, comments, and suggestions with me. All right, so that will be about it for this 1 year Extra Paycheck podcast anniversary episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, the show notes page, extrapodcast.com/55. If you want to subscribe to the show, or if you want to leave a review and a rating for the show, head over to extrapodcast.com/iTunes, and this will take you directly to your iTunes store. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next Monday.